Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Reign of Fire. So this, of course, is a modern-day Dragon Slayer movie, which I go out of my way to enjoy. It has a lot of these kind of elements, like it kind of feels in familiar territory to, of course, Pitch Black, the Vin Diesel movie. It kind of feels familiar to that because we just have a bunch of monsters that are on whatever planet, in this case, Earth, that these people, of course, are on. We end up having our characters in London stumble upon this dragon by just doing some construction work while they're digging down into the underground to go and accidentally stumble upon a dragon that they had woke up, a male dragon, who I guess is to eventually unleash female dragons for him to be able to let them all lay eggs for him to eventually go on and create more dragon-esh like things, to where all of a sudden they find out that the dragons are overwhelming the rest of the world, and that creates this kind of world that they are to live in now, desperately hoping that their crops can survive for another X amount of seasons, and so on and so forth. Uh, we really have it to where Matthew McConaughey is just a really strong character in this film, to where it really is to make him like the obvious favorite in this movie. Uh, but we also have it to where still, like, we're having some real estate fighting still going on with Quinn and Matthew McConaughey here, where it's kind of like uh, they are kind of sharing here, but I think overall people finish this film much more so remembering Van Zan than possibly Quinn. So going on into this movie, like, I would have to say, for people that are kind of looking to find this film, if I hadn't mentioned it already, you can go out of your way to two convenient ways to say that you've seen this film, simply because it's not a convenient movie to find right now, unless you want to rent or buy it, because it's conveniently on Amazon right now, so that's a lot more convenient than a lot of other movies. You could go out of your way to say that you've seen this movie by going in to an app freely, and go on to a number of two different apps. You could also, I think, rent this on Vudu, VUDU, possibly. Not quite sure. Didn't check that out. But without a doubt, you can go and Google search two apps here. You can Google search an app called Letter C Movies, so a letter and then a word, and that, of course, is a C Movies. You can go and search this app and there, in fact, download it, and you should be able to pretty much be able, after that, to see almost anything, with the exclusion of another app that I would recommend called Fox HD Movies that you could Google search and download that app. The title will say something different. The logo will say Fox HD Movies, but the title will say Play 1080p HD Movies, whatever. Blah, 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 yeah. Go ahead and download both those apps. And you could also go on to download on a Google Play Store TV Crush. Combine all three of those apps together, you should be able to really just see anything at that point. So, with that said, let's go out of our way to say that what is the almost teeing up version of this movie? So we go on and we have our characters in London go and stumble upon this dragon that, of course, is to have been accidentally dug up. And so we now end up having these people who are to desperately try to hope that their crop can save them, because it seems that dragons are to only really eat either people or their own ash. So, and I guess they are to be afraid of their own dead, weirdly enough, even though at some point towards the end of the film we find out that they're eating their own kind because they're starting to starve, I guess. So yeah, so With that said, let's just go on to that double five time territory. Let's just go into that spoilers. Let's just go into it because pretty much this is an hour and 30 some odd minute movie. So let's get into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time to get into spoil this movie because a lot of people might have heard of this film. A lot of people might have like, oh yeah, I saw this one time late at night at TV somewhere, or maybe I remember the trailer, or maybe you just remember a tiny smidgen bit about it. That makes sense, right? So let's go on and let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time we need to spoil this movie. So, spoilers. So we of course have young Quinn who is going to this construction site. We have a bunch of guys who are, of course, making jokes about Quinn working the night shift and a number of other things because his kid is there all the time, anyways. Because evidently his mother, of course, who is to be Karen, is to be kind of the lead of this construction because like of course we're trying to like break like maybe a stereotype or whatever. I don't know what they're exactly doing here. So we have Quinn go on and talk to his mother and mention about schooling, and not quite sure how exactly old this kid is, but it doesn't feel like he's ready for college just yet. But it seems that Karen is mentioning about a scholarship and how the scholarship didn't exactly work out, and that Quinn is probably not going to go on to go to college, that he's probably going to end up probably working alongside his mother doing construction because what else is like his life really left to lead. We have at one point where Quinn is asking whether his father can go and pay for his college, and Quinn then realizes that he's like, well, I probably shouldn't have asked because there probably is no father. Or Karen is to just go on and uh, not really know who Quinn's dad is for whatever reason. So we of course go on here, and one guy is to go on and stumble upon this void, and so out of all the people, I guess, who couldn't give an F, we have Quinn who is to make his way to this guy who has found this hole that he has kind of punched through, mentioning that Karen doesn't know what she's doing. So we go on here and we have this exchange between these two characters mentioning about arseholes and so on and so forth. So this guy goes and tells Quinn to go ahead and go into the hole to kind of see what he finds here. And he ends up waking up a dragon. He ends up running out of there, I guess, with some kind of chemicals on his eyes, where all of a sudden Karen is running to douse, of course, Quinn's eyes out to get rid of whatever chemical is to be put into his eyes because the dragon had spit into his eyes at some point. So we now have both Quinn and Karen running for their lives as they are making it to this elevator, desperately hoping that this elevator, because it's the only way up and down from this site that they're on, unfortunately. So Karen is going on desperately hoping that this elevator is to, of course, get them out of here and save them, of course, from this dragon. And so, unfortunately, we end up having this elevator breaking down, and Quinn's mother, of course, is to die here. And Quinn, I guess, surviving this is to go on to take all the people in London and like hide them away in some castle, which we find years later, as Quinn is to go on here and rattle off a bunch of things that he's learned about these dragons over time. Let me pause here for a second. All right, so we go on here, and we of course have them find out that I guess the dragons had been in theirs, had been hibernating since dinosaurs like time, causing, of course, dragons to wipe everything else out and them going into hibernation. We end up finding out that these dragons are kind of like fish in a way, where they end up having these glands that are to cause the fire to come breathing out of their mouths for whatever reason. So that comes into play like towards the end of the movie where they're kind of like waiting for these glands to start to flare up so they can pick the right time to go and shoot this explosive arrow into the mouths for them to just kill a dragon off towards the end of here. So we go on and of course have Quinn, who is to go with a guy named Creedy, who of course is Gerard Butler's character, to take care of these very young like people. It seems that most of them are of course to be kids, and so at one point we have both Quinn and Creedy who are reenacting some scene from Star Wars, but they're basically not saying that it's Star Wars, and they're saying that it's a white knight and a black knight, but it seems like word for word what happens in Star Wars, as they're to go on and have like reenactment of uh, Quinn technically being Darth Vader here, and Creedy being Luke Skywalker and saying, "I am your father." Ah, oh my god. Like, did you guys just make that up? And Quinn is like, "Yeah, we just made it up, sure." Like, so we of course have Quinn telling these kids at some point, like, well, hey, what do we do when we're awake? Look to the skies. What do we do when we sleep? Keep one eye on the skies. Uh, what do we do when we find a dragon? Dig hard, and run for shelter, and so on and so forth. Um, but I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. So Quinn is to wake up one day to all of a sudden have there being uh, sprinkler system being put in, and one guy had worked on a blast furnace, so he is to know that this sprinkler system is to work really well. And Quinn is like, "Oh yeah, like I'm not gonna like conflict with whether this is gonna work or not. I trust you." So Quinn goes and finds out that it seems that Eddie is to lose his mind. This guy is to desperately go on and just start harvesting when they shouldn't. Eddie wants, of course, just to grab all the food and just start eating it because they're starving. And Quinn is trying to take away this vehicle and say, no, like, we need to keep that food. And the problem is that people are just getting hungrier and hungrier every year because they rarely eat. And plus, there's just more and more mouths to feed. It continues to seem. So it's either you have to thin out the herd, which basically means you have to start killing people, or you just need to come up with some kind of way to come up with more crop, which I don't think they can really do here. They're lucky to be able to get the crop that they're getting. So Eddie goes off with his group and his vehicle to go on and start just stealing this crop, these tomatoes, these whatever. And so we have a number of people starting to eat this crop also while they're picking at it. So we, of course, go on here, and all of a sudden, while they're picking or harvesting this crop, we all of a sudden have a female dragon swinging by. And so we, of course, have the kind of the guy at the radio tower, Ajak, going and running on to tell Quinn what is going on here, that there's a dragon that's nearby. Because we had Eddie who had gone on to steal the keys from Quinn to go off and harvest this fruit or this food because they're hungry, they're starving, and whichever. So because Quinn was to take the key from Eddie for them to not use this car to go get this harvest, but they steal it from him while he's sleeping. So we go on, and we of course have this dragon arrive, and now Eddie is to be scrambling along with his people to just continue to keep grabbing food. And so now Quinn comes in with a bunch of guys in these kind of very like flame retardant like suits on. They're kind of all like metallic and silver and whatever. And so they're bringing these water trucks, and so they're consistently trying to blast this dragon with this water because there's nothing else for them to really do. So we have the dragon consistently flaming up these trucks to the point where Quinn is to be kind of trapped because there's one car that won't move. So Quinn now has to back up, pushing this vehicle along with them, and trying to drive their way out of there so that way they can be saved. So eventually it seems that the dragon is to fly off, luckily, because all it really cares about is the ash that is to be there, and it really doesn't care about, of course, these people. So we go on and we have these people hiding out, and after the dragon is to leave. So we of course go on here and we have Americans who arrive, Kentucky guys, I believe. So we have, of course, both Quinn and Creedy seeing that these guys are come here, and they're thinking, oh, these guys are marauders. They're gonna steal everything from us. Like, so if we haven't already ruined half of our crop, and Eddie had killed a number of his children in the process of trying to grab at this crop, we are, of course, now going on and having these marauders come in and be like, man, like, this is the worst of the worst. So Quinn goes on and is to see this supposedly marauder at first force and see that there's some pretty big kind of tanks and stuff like that. And he's like, man, that's a big tank. So Quinn goes out to kind of speak with them because, of course, we have Van Zandt that appears and is, of course, mentioning that, like, hey, who's your leader? And so all of a sudden we have Quinn who's like, well, or we have Creedy who's telling Quinn, it's like, well, I guess that's you. So we go on and we have Quinn who goes and meets with Van Zandt, and supposedly he's to go on to tell a number of things here. One of the things that he's to go on and mention that there was these outlaws at once called the Dalton Gang, and they had gone on and had been snuffed out by the townfolk who had decided to go and take these guys out themselves. And so we have Quinn who's saying, it's like, well, so you're the Dalton gang or the Dalton brothers, and Van Zandt is like, no, we're the townfolk. It's like, sure. So Van Zandt is going on and showcasing to Quinn here a dragon, like a dragon nail, finger, tooth. I'm assuming it's a tooth. Let's go with the tooth here. So, claw. I'm going with the tooth. So we go on and we have Van Zandt showing a. Let's go with the claw. That sounds cool. So Van is to give him this claw and is to tell him, like, hey, we're dragon slayers. And Quinn is like, oh, great. Because Van Zandt had went on to tell his story about them being dropped by this plane to come here to take down these dragons. And Quinn's like, I don't believe that. Like, I haven't heard of a story of a plane dropping in a number of years. So you go on and have Van Zandt telling him, it's like, well, hey, like, we're dragon slayers. And at that point, Quinn's like, man, I really don't believe you. But Van Zan is to tell him this story here that there uh, there are dragons who can kind of see like pretty okay during the day and even better at night, but kind of in between when we start to go from dusk till dawn kind of thing, that all of a sudden is to create this thing called a magic hour, where all of a sudden the dragons, that's when they're technically at their weakest, is because they're adjusting their eyes to the difference in day to night. So we go on here, and after this story that Quinn, that Quinn is to hear from Van Zan, we just weirdly have Quinn look at this guy's eyes and see that he's telling him the truth, and so they just let them all in. And Creedy is just like, "Are you seriously believing these guys? Like, if there's anything worse than marauders, it's Americans, and so on and so forth." And so we go on and we have Van Zan who is come here, and so all of a sudden there's to be this helicopter flying in, and they're like, "Whoa!" Like we really haven't seen like these guys really haven't seen anything like this in I don't know how long, and so they're really starting to truly believe these guys as we have, of course, Alex here with these archangels who are to be these guys who parachute out of this helicopter to go and uh, are to be like the guys who net the dragons while they're in air, or they're gonna freaking crash without being able to launch a parachute or whichever. So, so now we really just push on here, and we have these guys going off while Quinn is to go and hide with all of his people. We of course have Van Zan setting it up to go on to take down this dragon, which is, I guess, a female dragon because they haven't seen the male in a very long time. There's a lot. I guess there's a lot more female dragons than there is male dragons. I guess it's a very rare amount of seeing a male dragon. So if they wipe out the male, they wipe out the species, supposedly. So we go on and we have uh, them setting up these markers, these certain markers, so that way we can have these characters go and spot where this dragon is because they have some kind of radar kind of sensor kind of thing to put up here. So we have them kind of setting these up as we also are to have uh, Alex going and flying this helicopter, waiting for word here because she's still technically flying blind. So all of a sudden, we end up having the dragon that's right on top of this helicopter, forcing these archangels to go and leave this helicopter to start to dive to go and shoot out these nets with this gun, and have certain guys being put out there as bait to lure this dragon. So we all of a sudden have one guy who's called Piscatera, who is to not be able to put his sensor down so they can see what's going on here. And so now Quinn has to chase this sensor down to put it down. And so it seems like the netting doesn't exactly work with these archangels, and three guys are to die because of it. So we now go on and have, of course, uh, Van Zan telling Quinn that since he has, of course, his horse with him, to ride his way to meet Van Zan, so Van Zan can use this one uh, kind of gun that is to shoot out uh, this kind of spear. So it's kind of like a what is the perfect word here? It's kind of like a I can't think of it. I wanted to say like it's like an underwater gun, but I can't figure out what exactly the word is here. So it's a spear gun, let's say that. So we have this spear weapon that, of course, Van Zandt is to have on his tank. So he goes on and blasts this spear gun, and it ends up hitting this dragon and having it fall over. And so now this dragon is dead. So we go on and we have this whole castle group that are all celebrating. So like, yeah, they're blaring this music. They're drinking all their resources up. Uh, Weirdly, we have, I guess, some weird, bizarre alcohol that they are supposed to drink fast, so that way it doesn't. It can burn your stomach instead of burning your belly, or burn your throat. I mean, so we go on and we have everybody partying and everybody celebrating, and so Van Zandt comes in, is like, you know what, you sicken me. Like, yeah, one dragon and three people die. Like, man, like, it's good that you guys need heroes, because there should be a place where they don't need them. It's like, luckily we came here to save you uh, from getting burnt to a crisp, kind of thing. And so we have it to where, like, yeah, like, it makes a lot of sense for Van Zandt to just be so upset that these people are celebrating and having a party and wasting their resources. So we now go on and have Van Zandt, who's talking to Quinn, and the next thing that they want to go and do is that Van Zandt wants to head to London to go on and find the male, to wipe out the species. So, because they know, like, that's kind of the main focused area. So we go on and have Quinn telling them, it's like, well, hey, you go there and you're gonna get killed. You're gonna get wiped out. So we go on and we have Van Zandt, who of course is to kind of ask for volunteers to head with him. And so Alex is trying to, of course, be nice to kind of Quinn and so on and so forth, getting to know him, find out that Quinn is going to find this kid randomly while this kid was going on and holding the clutches of his dead mother, who I guess is to be Jared here. Jared Wilkie. Not quite sure. Don't remember if they even ever say this guy's name or not. So we go on and we have Quinn mentioning that he got this kid from the pound and that it was like 3 some odd years ago. And Alex is like, well, that's good of you that you took this kid on, because everyone else wouldn't have done the same. Everyone would have just left for their own lives. And Quinn was like, well, yeah, I'm not like that. So we go on here and we have Van Zandt who's asking for volunteers, and it seems like Eddie is gonna go, but it seems like there's very few that are willing to kind of volunteer for Van Zandt's group here. So we have Delton, who decides to go on Van Zandt here, who decides to, because I want to switch it up, there's only so many times I can say this name, and people will get annoyed. Delton goes on, it's like, well, hey, like, I guess since there's no volunteers, we're going to start our draft. And so all of a sudden, that's when Quentin is to get very upset, go into a fight with Denton here, go on and just start to brawl, and that's when Van Zandt gets shirtless and starts beating the out of Quinn. So we have Alex, who gives Quinn here some iodine, telling him that it's gonna hurt, but like it'll help anything. So we have Quinn who pours this onto his arm, and so Quinn is to find out that his technical son is leaving to go and help out Denton here, and so Quinn is like, "Well, I'm not your father, so you can go and do whatever you want," because that's what like his technical son is to throw at him, that he's not his son. So we go on here thinking that this son is going to leave, to all of a sudden have Quinn going and looking at certain crops and realize that his son didn't leave and he stayed with Quinn, and so Quinn hugs him because he's like, "Oh, good that you stayed, because he would have freaking died." So Den goes to London, and we have it to where there seems to be some kind of roadblock, and so Alex in her helicopter is going to have to fly around to figure out if there's any way around this. So we all of a sudden have Van Zan and a number of his people realize that there is to be the male dragon kind of flying by. And so they're kind of gearing up for this dragon, but all of a sudden, I guess they don't gear up for well enough, because all of a sudden, like with one pass, Van Zan loses all of his people with this dragon just blasting this fire all through them, murdering every single one of them. We have Van Zan scrambling underneath this tank, trying to avoid the flames. So we go on and we have Alex landing her helicopter, seeing if there's anyone left. Van Zan's left, and he's like, "Well, one pass killed all of my men." So now we have this male dragon making its way back to the castle, wanting to wipe that out also. So immediately we have where AJ, of course, is listening to the radio, and he ends up getting blasted through his castle, his part of his castle, and he's dead, the radio guy. So we go on, we eventually have just everybody just going into shelter, just kind of scrambling here. And so at one point they're trying to fan the flames, trying to stop this fire, going on and putting on the sprinkler system to avoid like flames coming at them and whatever and what have you. So at one point we of course have kind of Quinn tossing a fire extinguisher to Creedy to see if there's any other kind of flames that they can douse out here. And all of a sudden, when Creedy is to walk up these flight of stairs, he's to realize that there are flames coming from this dragon that end up not only like killing Creedy, but then kind of sealing them in, to where we have Creedy desperately trying to bang against this door, trying to get it open, realizing that his friend is on the other side, possibly dead here. So we go on and we have the Americans who go and open this sealed door, and we have Van Zan telling Quinn here that he was right, that they were going to die once they were to make it there. So we of course now go on, and like the one thing I want to go back to here is we have at one point where Van Zan was talking to Quinn and really saying that your people aren't really living, like they're starving, and like us just taking down one dragon is not going to like help the cause, because there's hundreds of dragons, and so like what you're doing is just like, it's not even living, it's not even surviving, it's just like you're waiting out, you're like you're dying slowly, like you're like uh, you're basically just like torturing yourself to death horrifically. So, or you're just kind of waiting to die is really what Quinn is really or what Van Zandt is really telling Quinn here is like you're just waiting to die. Like let's go on and let's kind of take out uh, these dragons and finally just like make it worth it. So we go on and we have Quinn who goes with Van Zandt and Alex to go to London to take out this male dragon. So we go on and we have Quinn, who of course is to know the place of which that they are going because he has been there before, and because they're basically going back to that same kind of construction site where he goes on and eventually finds the same cage that, of course, his mother had died in. So we have Van Zandt, Alex, and Quinn who are going through uh, these mines and these things and these whatever to go on and eventually find uh, a way to get at this male dragon. So we end up going on here, and we at first end up seeing hundreds upon hundreds of dragons. And so Alex is saying it's like, well, hey, we're outnumbered 3-1. But then all of a sudden, the male dragon starts eating a bunch of its other dragons. And so all the other dragons flee, and so there's to only be the one male dragon left. And so Quinn is to say, it's like, well, look at the odds now. It's 3-1 because he's the only one here. So we go on, and they're of course shooting out these flares and stuff like that to kind of well lit the place for them to go to hopefully um, make their way to have a good spot to get to this dragon. So we now have Quinn who's going on and giving all these guys these explosive arrows and these crossbows and whatever, and kind of telling them it's like, well, hey, like uh, leave your packs here, just weapons. And so we have them go off and saying how they're going to set things up. Where at one point Alex is just going to start running from one side to the other, leading this dragon to Van Zandt, where Van Zandt is going to shoot this thing with this arrow and hopefully kill it, which he doesn't. Instead, he ends up having to use this axe to try and swing at this because that's the only technical thing he has left, and the dragon ends sadly eating him, forcing him to drop this axe. So Alex is running and finding a hiding spot. We accidentally have Quinn, who is to drop his arrow somewhere, and now he has to go on and try to find it while hiding from the smell dragon. So we go on and eventually have Alex figure out where the arrow is. It is like right by some car's wheel. So Quinn goes on and, of course, is to try and grab for this arrow. So we have Alex who has this, like, I think it's like an AK-47, or it's some kind of gun of some kind. It's a machine gun of some kind. So she starts blasting this at this dragon and then running off. And so now Quinn is desperately trying to alert this dragon's attention so he can fire it into its mouth as this dragon is kind of gearing up to breathe fire here. So Quinn is to go on and blast this arrow into this dragon's mouth to all of a sudden have this dragon get killed off here. And so now we just have it where it's like, yeah, like technically we did it. We technically killed the species, but like there's still hundreds and hundreds of dragons still left. But still, like, we got the win here. So we end up having them rebuild, and we have them go and put up this radio this radio's uh, kind of dish like thing, or this, God, what is the perfect word here? This radio uh, kind of antenna. There we go. And so all of a sudden we have, of course, Quinn's son who's telling him, it's like, well, it seems that we're, of course, getting like the French calling us and asking who the boss is here. And Quinn looks at his son. He's like, well, I guess that's you. So we, of course, have Quinn's son who's like, oh, okay, well, thanks, I guess, for calling me boss. So we go on here, and really that's just the end of the movie, because we have both Quinn and Alex who are just like, well, hey, like, we're going to rebuild. Like, if it eventually gets burned down, we'll just rebuild, and we'll go and we'll hide and whatever. But, like, but now it seems like they are to have some kind of relationship going with the French now, and we'll see how that plays out. If there's ever going to be a Reign of Fire 2, for whatever reason. So with that said, I think I've covered this movie, maybe not in heavily detailed, but close enough, good enough for whatever thing. It also seems, sadly, that there's a very rare amount of people that are even talking about this movie. Or there's just a lot of videos where people are just kind of running certain scenes of this film, but nobody's really reviewing it. So, like, it's good for me to just go on and talk about this film, because not simply because it's like, oh, I'm a rare breed that is to go and review this film. No, like, I like this film. This film is a really interesting film, and I want people to know it exists out there somewhere. Because there are very few, like, good quality dragon films, because I think there are some kind of weird, goofy dragon films or whichever that people will go on and say, "Oh yeah, I liked this movie," and they're like, "Oh yeah, I think I've heard of this one, but like I never really went out of my way to watch it for whatever reason." Um, but with that said, I think I'm going to get out of here. Uh, I, I kind of feel bad because I didn't really go into detail about this movie, but I feel good enough about it to just kind of let it go, because who knows if people will even be interested in this film. Some people may not even go through this review, but thank you if you do. I really do appreciate it. So with that said, I think I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.